If you're looking specifically for Saudi Arabia, Alhamdulillah, Saudi Arabia has a strong economy, but we're in a difficult neighborhood from what you hear in the news. So the most thing that's affecting Saudi Arabia right now is the oil, is the price of oil. As you know, a large percentage of the income comes from oil. But if you look at the economy and the structure of Saudi Arabia, it is, we have, thank God, large reserves that can sustain the development of the economy for a number of years without the slowdown and cutting of the economy. Number two, if you look at the government and you look at the borrowing of the government, if you look at the borrowings of the government as a percentage of GDP, it's almost nil, which means versus some other countries that are over 100%, which means we still have power, the government, to come in and borrow locally and internationally. Third, also, the span of the projects that we have. The government, of course, is still the main provider of projects and labor in the country. So very simply what can happen is extend the tenor of the project. So if, for example, if they're going to build an airport and it was originally scheduled for 3 years, now it could be stretched for 5 years, which means the payments stretched. So in a summary, there are some difficult market moves happening right now, but Saudi Arabia is the strength of the economy and the reserve that we have can sustain it. Now the challenge is FDI. Is how do you bring in foreign direct investments in a country which has a difficult neighborhood? So there's a lot of incentives that's being done right now. But still, Saudi Arabia, in terms of an emerging market power, you have the public equity market is going to be opened in Saudi Arabia soon. It's actually middle of this year. And if you are one of the big investment banks and you have an emerging market fund, and you cannot afford not to have a small percentage being in Saudi Arabia to invest into that fund into Saudi Arabia. So a small percentage here from that large fund, a small percentage here from the other large fund would help bring in some foreign investments into Saudi Arabia. So we look forward for the opening of the public equity market to international investors by middle of this year. Doing business is the same, mind you're in Saudi Arabia, you're somewhere else. What will be opening up, or I would not call liberalization, what's happening in Saudi Arabia is, the important step is that you're allowing foreign investments to come in and invest into the public equity. Now, by definition, public equity doesn't become a family business anymore, because you're publicly held. Probably maybe 70% is still owned by probably 30% is owned by public, because that's the minimum. But still, you're regulated by the CMA. You have a regulating body versus a family business that's not regulated. The challenge for family business would be in terms of how, if they want to go public, how to have a strong corporate governance journey, so that when the international investors come in, they will actually, other than the business model of how much returns that you have, but if you have two companies in the same sector, and one has been a publicly held company for 5 years, and one just turned out to be a publicly held company, and everything being the same, you would look at the one that has a stronger corporate governance, the one that has stronger management, and that person is put. You look at a company where the person put at the helm of the company is put because of his qualifications and not because of his last name. So it's a challenge, but we very much welcome the foreign money coming in. What SAGIA right now is doing, and there is a new administration in SAGIA, is they're looking in terms of attracting investments up from a large sum of investments, or large ticket item investments. Before, you had a lot of smaller ticket size investments or foreign companies coming in, but a large number of small investments. So it's not making a dent into the economy. What's happening right now is you're looking for a few but large ticket items coming in and investing. So that's one of the. So you might hear a lot of complaints about there are restrictions, and SAGIA is putting restrictions on the smaller companies because they want to divert from smaller companies into larger companies. Plus, there has been some instances where suddenly you have the key with SAGIA and FDI is because they always say how many new licenses they've issued, how many new licenses they've issued. And what's nice is to see how many new licenses they've issued of new fresh FDI coming in, not of existing businesses that's already in Saudi Arabia that basically converted from 100% Saudi to foreign investors that were already somehow invested into Saudi Arabia.